A guy, his last spousal support check that he was paying, he literally got it in pennies, had a truck pull up to his ex's house and just dumped like millions of pennies on her lawn. It killed the lawn. She came at us to try to get the money back for what it cost to refertilize the lawn. Yeah. Then I had a guy who, you know, you can get those checks made that have like your photo on it.
Yeah.
He was writing his support check to his ex. It was a picture of him like making out with his new girlfriend, driving in the car with his new girlfriend. Every picture, every check had a picture of this guy with his new hot girlfriend on it.
Our guest today is the queen of keeping it real when it comes to couples and money. Welcome to the show, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you.
You've represented some of the biggest celebrities out there in their divorces.
And you're also the chief of divorce evolution at divorce.com. So tell me a little bit about that.
We created divorce.com as a way of normal people being able to go on who can't spend a ton of money on their divorces, being able to work through it and do online mediation. Because we figured people were meeting online, they were banking online, they were shopping online. Why not get divorced online too?
Perfect.
So before we get into everything, let's talk about some of our own legal stuff. Laura Wasser and I are both what's called non-client promoters of SoFi Wealth, LLC, the TLDR. We're both being compensated for our time to be on this episode of Richer Lives.
And I'm a registered representative with SoFi Securities, LLC, and an investment advisor representative with SoFi Wealth, LLC. Basically, in every episode of Richer Lives, that means we cannot make false or misrepresentative statements around investing and really just making sure we're providing good information.
Good.
Alrighty, now I want to get into the juicy stuff. I got engaged a year and a half ago and I'm getting married next June. So I have a lot of questions.
I bet.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. You know, my fiance and I, we've had a light conversation about a prenup, but can you explain a prenup to me? Like I'm 5, like, you know, how does it exactly work? Why should I get one? Why shouldn't I get one?
Okay. So prenups are different in every state, okay? And there's different laws in every state. In California, we're particularly stringent. We have code sections that govern what you need for a prenup. But let me back up a little bit because people always say, oh, prenups, I don't want to enter into a contract about my marriage or a contract about my divorce. And what I think they don't realize is when you get married, that's a contract. And in the state of California, for example, everything you earn or create after the day that you get married, if you don't have a prenup, is called community property. So every dollar you earn is 50% yours and 50% your spouse's. Also, if you earn more money than your spouse and you guys split up at some point, you'd have to pay him or her spousal support for a certain period of time. And if you make more money than your spouse and you have kids, you'd have to pay him or her child support for some period of time. That's a contract. So as you are getting your venue...
Is it like a long time or like...
The support?
Yeah.
Usually it's about half the length of the marriage if the marriage is less than 10 years. If it's more than 10 years, which in California, ironically, we call a long-term marriage, then it could go on. Court will retain jurisdiction.
Into perpetuity?
Possibly. I mean, generally, someone will go back after 11 or 12 years and say, I've now been paying for half the length of my marriage plus. Can we please reduce the support? But if your spouse never had a job, never did anything to become self-supporting, what are they gonna do? Go pump gas? I mean, they're not gonna ever be able to live in the lifestyle to which they became accustomed during your marriage when you were the breadwinner. So you really have to think about that and know about that. And it's not just like, oh, you know, pisha, I'm not gonna enter into a contract. I hate to make it unromantic because there's a lot that's romantic about it. But if you're gonna kind of cast your lot with somebody, this is a contractual obligation. So first, figure out what that obligation is if you don't have a prenup, and then say, you know what? I've been doing what I do for a really long time, and I'm not down with the idea that every dollar I make, that I worked so hard to become who I am and get the salary that I get, is gonna be half yours. So how about if we do this? We create a joint account. We both put money into that account to pay for our house and our rent and our kids and whatever else, and then anything else that's left over, we keep separate. Or we keep everything separate and we each pay for half of whatever. Or if you make a ton of money, I will contribute 20% of whatever I earn in any given year to either the community or just straight to you, and it'll be your separate property. There's all kinds of situations that we come up with that make sense for a prenuptial agreement. And so what you want to start doing if you're having a June wedding, is talking about it early. Start having conversations, because one of the things in almost every state is that prenup scribbled on the back of a cocktail napkin that you were using to hold your drink on the night of the rehearsal dinner, that's not gonna fly. It has to be enough time in advance of the wedding so that both people read it, understand it. In almost every state, for sure California, both people must be represented by counsel. So interestingly, you can get divorced on your own, but you can't get married with a prenup unless you've both been represented by attorneys. There has to be full disclosure in the state of California. Other states, not so much. So you must disclose everything that you've earned and everything that you have in debt and everything that you own before you get married. And the other person has to be aware of that so that they don't say, oh, if I'd only known that before we got married or before I signed this prenup, I never would have signed it.
Can I ask you like an interesting question? For most of your clients, do you find it's that there's one major breadwinner and the other person makes significantly less? Or it's that both people are high income earners? And how do the prenups for those like typically differ? Because I think one of the really negative perceptions about prenups is that there's one partner who's, just riding the coattails of the other and trying to get at what that person has. The term gold diggers.
Right.
Like, how does that work?
So it depends. I mean, every situation is different. It's obviously easier to negotiate and draft a prenup if both people are making their own money. It's a little bit more difficult if you have one person who's super wealthy and the other isn't. But keep in mind two things. One, the wealthy person can say, I'm totally fine just living together. I will support you. I love you. We don't need to get married. The person who wants to get married says, well, wait a minute. It's really important to me to walk down the aisle and wear this dress and have the security and the ring and all that. And maybe people say, I don't want to have children unless we're married. So if that's the case, then you need to think about what it is that is going to be fair. One reason that prenups get overturned is if they're unconscionable. So for example, you have—
What does that mean?
Like totally not cool.
Okay, cool.
So you have one person who's very, very wealthy and his or her much younger, less wealthy person moves in, they get married. They're married for 5 years. The prenup says no spousal support. Okay? That would probably be unconscionable because now for 5 years, this person's taken out of the workplace, taken out of the dating pool. They can't hook on to somebody else during this time. So that would be unconscionable. You want to come up with something that is going to be just a base. Okay, I'll pay her or him this much for a certain period of time so that he or she can get back on her feet or his feet. Also, another thing that cannot go in prenups is anything that has to do with child support or child custody. So you can't say, if we get married or when we get married, if we split up, I'm going to get the kids or we're going to do 50-50 or you will pay this much. States don't want to see that. They'll tell you to figure out what's going to happen at the time. So those can't be included. Another thing that can't go in a prenuptial agreement is anything that would be against public policy. You hear about these adultery or cheating provisions. There are some states that will let you have that. They will say—
Like a fidelity clause?
Yes, fidelity clauses. You can contract for anything you want. California says no fidelity clauses. That's against public policy. People are going to do what they do, and you can't prohibit them from doing that and then ding them because they've done this. So we hear about those all the time. I mean, again, people can agree to it, but if that prenup was taken to court, it could be overturned and not enforced as a result of something like that.
Oh, wow.
So I think you mentioned the cocktail napkin as like an example. Probably don't want to surprise someone before the wedding night, but how do you approach this conversation? Like, what are some best practices? Because a lot of people are probably hesitant and it could be an awkward situation. So
absolutely. So the good news is that we are talking about it more, and so it's not as much of a shock. But I would say have it in the most loving way. Approach it from, there's something I want to talk about, and I think it's important that we have communication in our relationship. Sometimes people do it in a therapy session. Sometimes people do it just one-on-one, but then each go to whoever is their financial advisor, speak to them about it. But I do think it's important that it's not a shock. That you begin speaking about it almost immediately when you're getting serious. Blame someone else. My parents are really going to insist on us having a prenup, or my business manager, or my agent, or whatever it is. And then really be upfront about why it is that you feel this way. A lot of my clients have been divorced before, and their about-to-be spouses went through that divorce with them. So they're like, I get it. Whatever you need to do, we'll have a prenup. I understand. I think it's important that if you're able to articulate what it is that's really concerning to you, that you do that, and that your about-to-be spouse understands it and is cool about that as well, especially if you are someone who's been in the workforce, established a name and a salary or compensation for yourself. You've been working for a very long time to become who you are. If the other person doesn't see that, understand that, isn't supportive of it, that's going to be something that trickles down through your relationship beyond just this prenuptial agreement. And a lot of times, remember, everything you bring into the marriage is your separate property. So that person's not getting a piece of that. Like you have these May, December romances. If somebody has been working for many, many years, already has his or her established estate, they're not getting any of that.
Yeah.
They're just getting whatever is the new money that's coming in. So it may not be an issue for some people. They're okay sharing the new money as long as the old money doesn't get tapped into.
And you mentioned California, you have to be represented. I guess, how do people find out where to turn to for help, and how do you suggest people go about that?
The internet is a great, I mean, again, I've been doing this now for 30 years. We didn't have as much accessibility back then as we do now, but I would go on and I would research. When I have something, I'm usually the person that's drafting the prenup for the person that usually is the more moneyed spouse, but I will send a list of 3 or 4. The other person should be able to pick who their lawyer is, even if it's being paid for by someone else. It's okay. They should be able to pick that person. They have attorney-client privilege with that person. They have to feel comfortable with that person. There's lists, directories. The state bar in each state has names of people. You should call and talk to somebody that you feel comfortable speaking with, saying what your concerns are. What if I get married and he dies and I have a prenup? Is there going to be something in the will? How do I know that I'm going to be okay? Can I continue living in this house with our kids if he's dead and he's left this house to the kids from his first marriage? All those kind of questions are things that you should have somebody you feel really comfortable with being able to answer for you.
Yeah, I love that point, because I think it's something where, as a financial planner, a lot of planners kind of avoid this topic entirely. So if you go to a financial planner for everything, they can't always help you in this area. So,
and they should be able to at least direct you to somebody who can.
Yep,
really
exactly.
important.
I feel like anyone who was considering getting married without a prenup is now reconsidering that after our conversation. And we want to keep digging into the finances of marriage and divorce with you. But first, let's take a quick break to talk a little bit more about SoFi. You know what I think is a major red flag, Brian?
what's that?
A bank that doesn't support your ambitions.
That is the worst. But SoFi members don't really know how that feels, because SoFi always has their back.
That's right. SoFi can help you reach all your ambitions all in one app, with benefits like complimentary access to financial planners and highly competitive APY on savings balances. You might be closer to achieving your goals than you think. Sign up to become a member today at SoFi.com/richerlives. I'm really curious. So Brian and I were just chatting a little bit earlier. He was giving me a little bit of life advice. You've been married for over a decade.
Yes.
What about
Long-term marriage in California.
Long-term marriage, I'm winning.
But, what about if you get married earlier on in your career? You may not necessarily have that many assets. Should people who don't have a ton of money, either party, should they still get prenups?
Possibly. It depends. I don't know that you need a prenup if you agree that anything each of you owns is going to go into that community pot. I have had people, particularly women, come to me. We were in business school together. We were both superstars. Everyone knew we were going to take over the world. We were in love. We got married. For the past 15 years, he's been sitting on the couch in his boxers, and I've been killing it out there. So I have 2 kids. He's a stay-at-home dad, but I still pay a full-time nanny. I have to arrange the play dates, do everything, arrange the doctor's appointments, everything else, and he hasn't made a dime. I want out, get this albatross off from around my neck. And I say, great, so let's see what you're looking at here. Here's your community estate. The guy on the couch in the boxers is getting half of that. You're going to probably pay some spousal support and some child support, and your IRA and 401k is going half to him. And she goes, what do you mean? How can that be? I'm the woman.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're the woman? It's gender neutral in this state. You're the breadwinner, and you're going to get screwed. So in that scenario, you might want to think about that before you get married. But I would say most people that come into a marriage where neither one of them has anything and they're going to build together probably don't need it. What I would say, though, is they should be having conversations about what's the plan? What is your student loan debt? What are we going to think about in terms of savings each year? Conversations that are absolutely not sexy and may not have any place in a prenup will definitely be things that people should be having. So really, really, if you're thinking about embarking on this, learn about it and communicate about it. It'll keep you married for longer.
I guess on the other end, the idea of a post nup. I mean, you hear that come up from time to time in situations where there's not a prenup. Can you explain that to us and when that works out?
Postnup is post-nuptial, so after you've gotten married, then you're doing those full disclosures, because you don't have to disclose everything to your spouse when you're married. So you would if you did a postnup, and you also would if you were getting divorced. Sometimes I'll say to people, I think the only way you're gonna get the information you're looking for is if you file for divorce and initiate formal discovery, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
Postnups are more difficult because you've already established a certain pattern. If it's a week after the marriage, it's different. But if you're 10 years plus and you're like, honey, I was thinking about it, I'd like a postnup, she's probably gonna be like, yeah, I don't think so, bro. But
For the record, I'm not considering a postnup.
He's not considering a postnup. But those are more difficult. And there usually would be some reason that you would want to do it. And the reason wouldn't be you caught her cheating on you or you just got a huge raise. It would have to be something else, probably having to do with estates. And like I said, they are more difficult because you're changing the focus of how it is right now as opposed to changing what has about to happen.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
I'm curious, what is like the weirdest scenario that you have seen in a prenup, like things that people have agreed to split or keep on their own?
I've had people ask for things like, well, if she doesn't lose the baby weight within a certain period of time, she gets less money, or the fidelity clause. I even had a woman say to me, I've been living with him for 2 years. He does not put the seat down. He does not put the cap back on the toothpaste. I want it in this. And I was like, we can't do that. That's not
Yeah, but that's
okay.
all like, you're not allowed to do that.
Well, you could do it. It's just that it wouldn't be upheld and it could
Okay.
cause the whole agreement not to be good. So it's those kind of things. I mean, the craziest things would probably be some of the religious stuff, because beyond that, now you're getting into it being against public policy.
Right.
Does a prenup make it easier to get divorced? Because I think that's pushback that we hear from a planning perspective, and I've even thought myself, like, how does that work out?
It makes
what are
it
your
a
thoughts
little
on
bit.
that?
It makes it a little bit easier to get divorced because now you have a schedule of what will be paid. You can see what the person had coming into the marriage because you've got an exhibit that discloses all their assets, and now you can see how the assets have grown and who has what. Usually there will be some kind of a support provision, maybe not a waiver, but some kind of a limitation. Okay, no matter how long you're married, 15 years, whatever, support for half the marriage and not more than X per year. So those parts of it will be easier, yes.
So I think one of the other kind of apprehensions, so I mentioned, okay, it makes it easier to get a divorce and things like that, could be the cost. And I guess, how much does a prenup cost? Are there cost-effective ways to do it? Like, what are people looking at in this situation?
It really depends on the law firm. We usually have a retainer. We bill against that retainer. We try to get it done within that amount, but sometimes it goes over. The thing that people can do to make it less costly is have conversations with each other as it's going on, because you're negotiating with someone with whom you're going to live, hopefully, for the rest of your life. So you guys talk about it, then come back to talk to your attorneys. Also, this exhibit that we have to attach that has the disclosure of all your assets, that should be something you can work on. You know what you have better than I do. So you, your business manager, whoever, helps putting that together. And I think those are the ways of kind of keeping the cost down in terms of having a prenup. In preconceived notions, is it easier to get divorced with a prenup? Maybe a little bit, but make no mistake, as you can imagine, as somebody who's happily, I hope, married.
Happily married, good.
Getting divorced is not easy. It's not easy no matter what. So if you can make the business part of it, the legal part of it a little easier, then you can focus on the emotional part, and that will be so much better for you. You'll have more money to spend on therapy or massages or facials or trips somewhere that will make you feel better about yourself, or girls' weekends. Well, you can have a girls' weekend, but you know what I mean. Actually, maybe that would make you feel better if you had to get divorced. But again, if you can be cost effective, it's not just the financial cost, it's the emotional cost.
I mean, I love how you mentioned like the communication piece, because simply having proactive communication about this process, about disclosing assets, about roles and responsibilities, like, saves money on the prenup, but also is very, very important to the relationship.
Totally. And it helps you move through the relationship, because your relationship will change, your roles will morph. If you're able to develop those tools before you get married, then you can always go back to them when there is trouble in paradise, which there will be.
Yeah. I think you kind of touched upon this earlier, but like, we're so comfortable getting naked in front of our partners, but getting financially naked or talking about something like as touchy as a prenup can be really challenging. My fiance and I, we did a pizza date night, and we sat down, we laid it out all on the table, and we were just chatting about like, hey, like, you know, this is what we're going to do. Neither of us come from a ton of money. We've had some really, wonderful successes in our careers, but I wanted to make sure that I protected my business while we were going into it, because he has a really lucrative, job where he works for a corporation, but I don't have that type of security. So I needed to have that. And he was a lot more receptive to the prenup than I'd anticipated. I think we oftentimes just like hype it up in our heads a little bit. And
didn't you feel better after and closer to him after?
So much closer and so much better. And when he was like, yeah, I'm actually like cool with this, I was like, wow, okay, like maybe I am marrying the right person.
Yeah, it really is. It's a huge weight off once you have that conversation. But it also, I think that kind of communication builds intimacy.
Yeah, definitely.
Because let me tell you something. Once you have kids, it's a whole other ballgame in terms of what is gross or yucky or not sexy. So
I really appreciate this because, going into this, I was kind of anti-prenup, just probably didn't fully understand it, didn't fully appreciate it. But I love the idea of, okay, you're entering a contract anyways. This is a way to force communication that you should be having in a relationship anyways. So I think this has really clarified it for me and hopefully for our viewers.
good.
All right, so it is a finance show, and as we all know, talking about finance in theory is a lot easier than actually doing it in real life. Similarly, Laura, it's very different to practice the law around divorce versus getting divorced yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? Were there any insights that you picked up that you wouldn't have necessarily picked up going through other people's divorces?
My divorce was actually my first case.
That's one way to learn.
Yeah, exactly. So now I could say, I have experience in this field. What I said before about it never being easy is true. Until you've actually gone through it and felt those feelings of loss and failure and humiliation, you don't really understand, even if you've had a friend or a relative that's gone through it. I also have 2 kids with 2 other people that I was in serious monogamous relationships with subsequent to my marriage. And those breakups were also really difficult. There were financial issues that had to be discussed, but of course, custody of my 2 sons, all of those things. What I learned is, particularly if it's somebody with whom you have children, this person is going to be in your life for the rest of your life, not just till they're 18. Because I have a 18-and-a-half-year-old who's in college right now, and I assure you, I still talk to his dad quite a bit. You're going to have to go to high school graduations and weddings and children being born and all that kind of stuff. So you really need to make sure that you keep in mind, unlike any other kind of law, this is personal. This is someone you're going to know, and this is someone who's your family. And so you really have to think about handling your divorce or your separation in a way that is respectful and kind. And again, if you have kids, loving, because that person will end up being one of your greatest allies as you go through the terrible twos and the teenage years and all that stuff. Financially as well, because, hey, can you help me cover this? And is it okay if he does this? And I was thinking about this program here. What do you think? Having that kind of communication, cooperation, and consideration, the 3 C's for the other person, was really helpful for me when I went through my breakups, and then being able to have some compassion for people that are going through it themselves, and knowing that they're dealing with probably the hardest thing they're ever going to have to deal with in their lives, and paying you a lot of money per hour to deal with it. And so being able to say to them, this is something you should maybe think about, go back, talk to your about-to-be ex, talk to friends, therapists, whomever, and then come back to me with what your thoughts are so we can work it out.
And through that process and just your experience working in this field, what are some stigmas or misconceptions around divorce that you were like, okay, I wish these would just be put to bed because they're not true?
That it's a failure, that you failed. I mean, I think we grew up in a society where, if you say my parents were married for 50 years, it's like, that's great. It is great if it was a happy marriage and if they grew and they evolved together. But I really do think that people that are in an unhappy marriage without the possibility of fixing it, whether they've been to therapy, if it's just not happening anymore, move on. Because I do believe, and my personal experience has led me to this conclusion, children seeing 2 happy parents, even if they're not living in the same house, is better than seeing 2 miserable, repressed, resentful parents who are going to be married for 50 or 60 years. I think that's really important. And so I wish that stigma would go away. Also, the idea that somebody did something wrong. Sometimes you just grow apart, and that happens. And so it didn't mean somebody was cheating or gambling or spending too much money or drunk or abusive. It just meant that it wasn't working out. And that's a perfectly irreconcilable differences, perfectly reasonable explanation. Don't look too hard for something else that's going to be so scintillating.
And do you think that's changed over time? Like, has that stigma gone away or been reduced? How has that changed?
A little bit, I think it has. Even since I started practicing, I believe that it has. I wrote a book 10 years ago called It Doesn't Have to Be That Way. And the book was very well received, but I had a lot of people say like, oh, I don't need that book. Whereas now they'll be like, I have it on my bedside table. I just want them to know that it's there just in case. I think that the stigma, look, here's the thing. 50% of marriages in this country end in divorce, okay? So we know it's happening. Not talking about it seems nonsensical to me. And I think people now, every person has had somebody that they know that's gone through a divorce. At school, you know, when my kid was in kindergarten, he was the only child in his class whose parents didn't live in the same house. By the time he got to 4th grade, it was about 40% of the class. And by the time he started high school, it was about 60% of the class. Now, we can say, isn't that too bad that people aren't staying together? Or we can say, isn't it great that they're working it out, they're moving on, and even if they now engage in other relationships, that's just more people to love my kid. We went to visit my older son, because he's in school in Rome right now. It was me, my younger son, my older son's dad, his new wife. Then my younger son's half-sister met us there because she's living in Europe. And it was, I know it's so cliche to be Modern Family, but you know what? There was a lot of love at that Thanksgiving table. A lot of people who've known each other a long time and have a vested interest in having everyone in our family be healthy and happy. And that, to me, was thankful.
As someone who grew up with like 3 or 4 different Christmases, that's also a plus, too.
Yeah. Brian's like double dipping. Be like, yeah, I didn't get a gift at that Christmas. Can I get that here? And then just stack them
Kids
up.
definitely know a way to play it, too. If they don't get one thing at mom's, they go to dad's. That's why you have to be really in good communication with your ex, because you have to be able to be like, by the way, he's going to call you and ask you for that Xbox. I already told him no because he didn't get a good grade in math. You have to have that communication. People that play games and go, I'll get you the Xbox, that's not a good way to be. And kids don't grow up healthily in that kind of an environment.
Yeah, I love, because it's kind of like sharing both the emotional and financial resources. Because like the finances are only one part of raising kids.
Totally.
What about that statistic you mentioned that, like, you know, nearly 50% of marriages end in divorce now? What do you think the reason for that is? And why was that number so much lower in our like grandparents' generation? And what can people now do to really mitigate that risk?
Well, I think yes, it has changed. It's greater now, but it's been pretty high, I think, since the 60s. I think before then, people really weren't able to get divorced. There was more of a taboo. And in our grandparents' generation, at least women were absolutely, completely dependent on their spouse for financial. You didn't have 2 people in the workplace. So that was one reason. They're like, I'm staying here because I don't have anywhere else to live or anyone else to pay for me. So that was one thing. The stigma also has changed a bit. I think people are getting married later and not marrying. And I think that maybe has brought it down a little bit in the past few years. Also, keep in mind, if it's 50% of all marriages, that's only, I think, 35 or 40% of first marriages. Second marriages, believe it or not, are more likely to divorce. And third marriages are even more likely to, because they're like, I've done this already. Call Laura Wasser. Let's get her on the line and get this done. Maybe I can get a discount.
Yeah, like a punch card or something.
The bulk discount.
So I think that's interesting, though. Like, are there lessons that you've picked up from seeing divorces that couples could apply and say, hey, here's what we should do, whether it be managing finances, relationship, what have you, on how to make a relationship work, learning from that?
I would say really talk about everything, but one thing particularly for you guys, because you're into the finance realm, is talk about finances. If you are getting married, talk about money, but also go to your financial planner together. Sit down with the shoebox full of the receipts. Do it together, because then you're a partnership and you're not that spouse who's like sneaking the bags of shopping in without your husband knowing, or hiding the credit card bill, putting it on different things. You're both in this together. I think a lot of times in the past decades, women have really abdicated their financial responsibility, and maybe men just thought that's how it was supposed to be. If you come into a marriage with both of you going, we're partners in this, even if you're the breadwinner, I'm now going to be the person who manages our finances when you bring it home. Come up with a partnership that you both understand. If you have a partner in this financial situation with you, you're not going to hide things from her. You're not going to hide things from him. You're in it together. You'll probably stay together longer.
It's funny you bring that up because, I mean, I'm the breadwinner and I'm Dr. Money. This is what I do for a living. My wife manages our finances. So like it has to be that way. It's way more enjoyable that way.
Yeah.
But it's not always going to be what you assume. That's why
Right.
you just got to talk about it and figure out the best approach. So I guess shifting gears, like post-divorce and navigating finances after that, like what do you think is the biggest surprise or most common mistake that people make as they transition from finances as a married couple to finances on their own?
I think things that I've watched a lot of people grapple with is insurance. You know, if you're not married to the person anymore whose company is providing medical insurance, you have to figure out some kind of a COBRA plan. Insurance is expensive. Now you're on your own. You have to figure that out. That's usually something we say, we got to talk about this as part of the divorce. I don't want you getting X amount per month as support and spending 3/4 of it on your insurance. Yep. I think child-rearing things, people that, you know, how much are we going to give the kids? Are we going to private or public school? Do we have a 529? Things that they may not both be thinking about until they're kind of on their own. Child care also. Do you get full-time child care if you're not working 40 hours a week? Another question, how does that factor into marital lifestyle? These are things that a lot of people don't know until after they're trying to transition and figuring out what they actually need and what a budget is going to look like. And we have people that we will refer them to that can really help post-dissolution kind of budgeting, spending, financial planning. And like you said earlier, investing. I mean, don't just spend your nest egg as time goes on. Figure out a way to actually be making money. If you're not getting back into the workforce immediately, figure out something that's going to enable you to be supplementing whatever your support is, eventually being self-supporting, and then also having retirement savings.
Yeah, and I think that from a planning perspective, figuring that piece out and budgeting for that has been a really big challenge for people, especially if there's different roles like, hey, so-and-so managed the finances, so-and-so didn't. Managing
Now
money
who's
for the
doing
first
it?
time,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
that is a big deal.
It is. And again, when you get divorced, there's a certain discovery process, disclosures that have to happen. There's basically 4 corners. That's what you have, there's what you owe, there's what you earn, and there's what you spend. And some people have never seen all of that until those disclosures take place. But when they do, you kind of are able to see, oh, this is what we spend. We spend more than we make. How does that work? And you figure that out, and that was what takes you to the next phase. But again, it is a rude awakening for a lot of people.
Okay, here's kind of a tricky question, Laura. You obviously serve very, very high net worth clients. My partner and I are finding individual attorneys for ourselves to draft up this prenup. But what about someone who may not necessarily have that many assets? Like, is there a place that they can go to find the resources about getting a prenup drafted or even a postnup where they're not gonna spend $1 quadrillion doing so?
Yes. For prenups, again, you both have to have attorneys, but you could absolutely go through the process of drafting it, finding out the law, et cetera, without having those attorneys. There's plenty of online resources. In terms of getting divorced, you figure out what those 4 corners are, whether it's what you have, what you owe, what you earn, and what you spend. You kind of talk about that. The more communication, even if you didn't have communication when you were married, if you're getting divorced, having those kind of conversations will help get you through your divorce in a more cost-effective way. And there's all kinds of online resources, divorce.com being one of them, where we will take you through the process of kind of a self-diagnosed mediation to the point where you actually have a judgment. So you have all of that disclosure, you've negotiated the deal, and then of course the child custody piece of it is an extra if you have kids. Going through that, we have calendars, we show you how to do it. That will save so much money. And I really do believe at some point, there will always be complicated, complex divorces that need family law attorneys, but I think probably 80% of the divorces that happen in this country could be done by the parties on their own if they took the time to kind of learn about it. It's hard because you're going through something emotionally devastating to learn the law, apply the law to your fact scenario, and then come through it on the other end. Huge cost savings.
Love that.
And then what would you say, like, indicators for do it online, do it yourself, versus, okay, I need to tap in an expert here and spend the money.
Laura.
Yeah, tap in a Laura. Like, what would be some things that would kind of cause you to be in one camp versus the other?
If your spouse really wasn't receptive to the idea of doing it this way. I mean, I have had cases where I'm representing one person and the other person is kind of doing it on their own. That's not usually a good scenario.
Yeah.
You want to be on the same page. Also, there's plenty of things in between an online divorce and a Wasser, Cooperman, and Mandels. There's mediation with just a mediator, just the two parties go in. There's assisted mediation with attorneys. There's collaborative law where you bring in a whole bunch of other people that are helping, whether it's a life coach and a financial planner. Yeah. There's all kinds of ways and resources that we have these days to get through it in a way that you don't need the most expensive, high-profile family law attorney helping you. Also, start that way. Yeah. Maybe people come to me now and they're like, we got the custody worked out. We have a co-parenting therapist. She helped us come up with a schedule. You don't need to worry about that. Here's the language, drop it into our judgment. But we are having an issue about how much spousal support I'm going to pay him. Or we are having an issue about how we divide his loan out corporation because he wrote 6 scripts during our marriage and then he wrote half of a script after we separated, and that's the one that's getting greenlit. What piece of that action do I get? So there are more complex things that are harder to do on your own, but if you can kind of knock out the easier ones, all the better.
It sounds like it really just is trying to save as many hours, like not having your attorney do that, doing it yourself, making it super easy so they can just pop it in for you, essentially, into a document, and saving the dollars.
Yep.
While we're on the subject of financial independence, let's talk about how SoFi can help you work toward that goal.
When you're in a relationship, a tough but important thing to think about is having a safety net. And that starts with having a personal savings account. And not just any savings account, a good one.
So true. A solid high-yield savings account like SoFi's earns you more money on your money.
Plus, you're not losing that money to account fees, and it's all protected with FDIC insurance that can go all the way up to $2 million through a network of participating banks.
It's hard to go wrong with a SoFi savings account.
Go to SoFi.com/richerlives to learn more about how to keep your financial future secure. All right, I now have a question because I saw it in a headline and it is about some celebrity behavior that I think is very interesting, okay? So when celebrities get divorced, I've noticed that the person who is thinking about the divorce, or at least the tabloids say is thinking about the divorce, what they'll do is they'll go to a bunch of different divorce attorneys and have conversations to, I think the phrase is conflict out those lawyers. So when their partner goes, they can't talk to those high-profile family law attorneys. Does that work? Is that real?
It is real. I think it was developed on The Sopranos. I think that Tony Soprano
I was talking about that show earlier today, ironically.
It does work because if I've had a meeting or an in-depth telephone conversation with you and any confidential information was imparted to me, I now cannot represent your spouse if he or she calls me. So at our firm, we have a pretty complex conflict screening system. I rarely answer my own phone and start talking to somebody. My assistant will speak with them, get some information, and then we'll kind of figure out what that means. Usually it's a referral, so if it's a referral from somebody, I'll know. There have been times where maybe I've spoken with one person and then one of my partners has spoken with another person, so nobody at the firm can represent them. I don't do it. I don't tell people, oh, make sure you call this person and this person so your spouse can. Most of the colleagues that I have in our family law community are really good, and I would be happy to have any of them on the other side. I do know lawyers that have had people call me and try to conflict me out, which I guess is flattering.
Yeah, it's a compliment.
I'm not that scary, but I do try to get things done, and we don't make a ton of money on those clients. And I tell people all the time, the more you guys argue, the more conflict there is, the more money I make.
Yeah.
I do have a really nice car. My kids are in private school. Let's try to get you out of this for less. And that's kind of our whole firm's philosophy. We're very resolution oriented. So sometimes people spend $100,000 arguing the conflict motion, just trying to keep somebody out. I've had people say, oh, I called and spoke with Laura Wasser. And I'm like, no, you didn't. And then I'm like, just hire somebody else. You don't want me. We don't want to argue about this.
Wow.
So we don't want to take conflicting out from celebrities, but is there something celebrities do that, you know, everyday people should think about if they're going through the divorce process or anything on the prenup side of things?
Absolutely. I mean, look, you're not going to love this answer as much because it's not financial, but it is financial because if you are getting along, you're spending less money. We have seen a real turning of the tide since Gwyneth and her conscious uncoupling, and Jen and Ben doing mediation, not Lopez, but Garner, doing things in a way that makes sense, as I spoke about, being good co-parents, discussing things, having other professionals, whether it's a co-parenting therapist or a business manager coming in to help. That will help. And what's happened is it's trickled down. When celebrities go on vacations with their exes or everybody has Thanksgiving together.
It's normal.
It's normal. It shows up in one of the magazines, and then people in, you know, the middle of the country read it and go, I want to be like them. They're beautiful, they're thin, they're rich, and they're getting along with their ex. And the ex is like, huh? You want me to come over for Thanksgiving? What? But
I
it
don't
works.
look like Ben Affleck, sorry.
But it works, and now that's become kind of a trend that people have accepted, whereas it used to be the full mudslinging tabloids, he did this, who's she dating? We are moving away from that, and we're getting to a place where it is healthier for kids to grow up in two families and not feel that stigma, and I think that's a good thing.
Okay, but
That's
I'm
interesting.
here for the gossip, the mudslinging. I want to know, okay, what is the weirdest thing that you've ever had to divide? What I'm picturing right now, you've all seen this meme, the couple selecting Beanie Babies on the courtroom floor. What is your Beanie Baby moment?
A guy, his last spousal support check that he was paying, he literally got it in pennies, had a truck pull up to his ex's house and just dumped like millions of pennies on her lawn. It killed the lawn. She came at us to try to get the money back for what it cost to refertilize the lawn. Yeah. Then I had a guy who, you know, you can get those checks made that have like your photo on it.
Yeah.
He got a full, I guess he wrote checks. I don't know if it was in cursive.
Red flag.
But every month that he was writing his support check to his ex, it was a picture of him like making out with his new girlfriend, driving in the car with his new girlfriend. Every picture, every check had a picture of this guy with his new hot girlfriend on it.
So we see celebrity gossip all the time. What about examples where maybe celebrities plant things in tabloids and, you know, maybe they're going through a divorce? Does that happen? And if so, like, how does that even work?
It happens. It works usually with a very good PR person. And we generally recommend against it. There is just no good that can come about any kind of a story, even if it's you taking your kids to the pumpkin patch on Halloween. I mean, it's not awful, but it's not really going to move the needle on custody. So most of our judicial officers don't read the tabloids, and if they do, they don't want to admit that they're swayed by them. Our firm doesn't make any comment on media. We will not speak to any press, and we generally advise that if you have a PR person during the pendency of a divorce, have them stand down.
Gotcha. I mean, it almost sounds kind of like counterproductive to what you were talking about earlier related to communication, getting on the same page. So.
Yeah. Well, I will say one of the reasons I'm really happy to be here is I think that after discussions about money, divorce might be the second biggest taboo. And so I'm happy to bring these two things together and then do it with love.
Thanks so much for joining us today, Laura.
Thank you all very much.
Brian, I am so excited to take all of this wisdom that we got today and take it into my marriage. I feel like Laura did such a good job of pulling back the curtain behind marriage and divorce and money.
Yeah, she really did. And I've been married for a while, and there's still plenty of takeaways that I got. It was fantastic information.
If you like this episode of Richer Lives, then be sure to like and subscribe so you'll get a reminder to tune in next time.
And leave a comment below to tell us about who you want to see next.
That's all for today. See you next time.
Hi, it's me, Brian Walsh, aka Dr. Money, again to talk about some of the legal stuff. Though I am a certified financial planner professional, your finances are unique. That means anything I talked about today shouldn't be considered advice. Think of it more as high-level education or guidance.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And then she told me the story, and she's like, are you smiling? And I was like, I am not smiling. And I was like,
That's right. Was that too aggressive?
It was a little aggressive.
Less of a...
Yeah.